Forget the gleaming white statues. Forget the capes and the oiled abs of the silver screen. To understand the Greek warrior of 500 BC, you must first really know about him. He smells of stale olive oil, wood smoke, and the sharp, metallic tang of oxidized bronze. He is not a professional soldier. He is a farmer who has been forced by history to become a killing machine. Tonight, we travel back to the dawn of the 5th century BCE. The Persian Empire, a colossus to the east, is beginning to cast a long, dark shadow over the Aegean. But here, in the dusty streets of Athens, a new and radical experiment is taking hold: democracy. For the first time in human history, the men who fight the wars are the same men who vote for them. We will spend 24 hours with a man named Xanthos. He is a Zeugitai, a man of the middle class. He is not a king, nor is he a pauper. He is the man of the yoke, the backbone of the phalanx. Through his eyes, we will discover that the glory of Greece was not built on philosophy and art alone, but on the calloused hands and steady nerves of men who stood shield to shield in the dirt. This is a day in the life of a Greek warrior. This is what life was really like. Chapter 1. The cold dawn of the Zeugitai. It is an hour before sunrise in the year 500 BC. The city of Athens is not yet the school of Hellas. It is a cramped, chaotic sprawl of mud brick houses and winding, unpaved alleys. Inside a modest home in the district of Melite, the air is thick and stagnant. Xanthos, our protagonist, stirs on a woven mat in the andron, the men's quarters. The first thing he feels is the ache. It is a dull, rhythmic throb in his lower back and shoulders, a souvenir from yesterday's labor in his olive groves. At 35, Xanthos is in the prime of his life, but a life of manual labor in the Mediterranean sun has aged him prematurely. He rolls off his mat, his feet hitting the cold, packed earth floor. There is no morning ritual of luxury. He splashes his face with water from a ceramic basin, the liquid biting in the morning chill. The man of the yoke. To understand Xanthos is to understand the Zeugitai. In the social hierarchy of Athens, established by the lawgiver Solon and recently refined by the reforms of Cleisthenes, Xanthos sits in the crucial third tier. He is a yoked man, a name derived from the pair of oxen he owns to plow his fields. He is a citizen farmer. This status is the pivot upon which the entire Greek world turns. Unlike the Spartan equals we often imagine, men who did nothing but train for war while slaves fed them, Xanthos is an amateur. He is a producer first, a warrior second. His wealth is measured in medimnoi of grain and jars of oil. Because he can produce at least 200 measures of goods a year, he is wealthy enough to afford the Panoply, the full suit of heavy bronze armor. This is the central paradox of the Greek polis. Citizenship is not a gift. It is a purchase made in blood and bronze. If Xanthos could not afford his shield, he would be relegated to the light infantry, the siloi skirmishing on the fringes of battle with stones and slings. But because he can afford the bronze, he earns the right to stand in the front rank of the phalanx. He earns the right to vote in the assembly. In 500 BC, the spear is the ballot. The life Xanthos leads is captured perfectly in the words of the poet Hesiod, who wrote in Works and Days, "Work is no disgrace, it is idleness which is a disgrace. But if you work, the idle will soon envy you as you grow rich, for fame and renown attend on wealth." For Xanthos, the glory of war is secondary to the survival of his crop. As he wraps a simple wool chiton around his frame, he is not thinking of the Iliad or the heroes of old. He is thinking of the drought. He is thinking of the debt he owes to a neighbor. The heroic age is a myth told by poets. The reality of 500 BC is a constant grinding struggle against the soil, the sensory world of the oikos. The house begins to wake around him. He hears the muffled sound of his wife, Aristomachy, in the courtyard, directing the two enslaved women as they begin the morning's grinding of grain. The sound is a rhythmic, abrasive scritch of stone on stone, the soundtrack of the ancient world. There is a faint smell of wood smoke as the charcoal brazier is lit to take the dampness out of the air. Breakfast is a utilitarian affair, a piece of coarse barley bread dipped in unwatered wine. The wine is sharp, acidic, and carries a hint of resin. It hits his empty stomach like a spark, waking his senses. He looks toward the corner of the room, where his aspis, his great circular shield, rests against the wall. Even in the dim light, the bronze facing catches the glow of the embers. It is a heavy, brooding presence. It weighs nearly 15 pounds on its own. It is the most expensive thing he owns, more valuable than his house or his oxen. It represents his family's security and his city's freedom. In this moment, Xanthos is not a warrior in the Hollywood sense. He is a husband, a father, and a businessman. But as he reaches out to touch the cold rim of the shield, he is reminded that his life belongs to the polis. At any moment, the herald's cry in the Agora could turn this farmer into a killer. The birth of the citizen. This transition from the 6th to the 5th century BC is one of the most volatile periods in human history. The old aristocratic families who once ruled Athens from the backs of horses are losing their grip. The power is shifting to the men of the phalanx. This is the Hoplite revolution. When the battle line is made of 8 ranks of men pushing together, the individual hero matters less than the collective. If the man next to you breaks, you die. This creates a radical form of equality. If we are equal on the battlefield, we must be equal in the courts. Xanthos is part of the first generation of men to truly feel the weight of this responsibility. As he prepares to head out into the city, he checks his hands. They are stained with the black juice of olives and the gray dust of the earth. He is a man of the dirt, about to enter the world of high politics and heavy bronze. The sun is now cresting the hills of Hymettus, and the day in the life has truly begun. Chapter 2. The Panoply, a burden of wealth. The sun has fully crested the Attic hills, but in the shaded courtyard of Xanthos's home, there is a cold, metallic task at hand. Before the chores of the farm can resume, the tools of the citizen must be maintained. To the modern eye, the armor of a Greek hoplite is an aesthetic masterpiece, the gleaming bronze of a museum display. To Xanthos, it is a heavy, high-maintenance burden that represents his family's entire life savings. He pulls the aspis from its hook. This is not the light wooden buckler of a Hollywood epic. It is a 3-foot-wide, convex beast of oak, leather, and bronze, weighing nearly 15 pounds. Xanthos takes a handful of fine sand and a rag soaked in cheap olive oil, beginning the rhythmic, grinding labor of scouring away the green oxidation that has crept across the rim overnight. The sound is a harsh, abrasive hiss, the sound of a man keeping his lifeline intact. The engineering of the phalanx. The aspis was the most significant technological advancement of the 6th century. Unlike earlier shields that hung from a neck strap, the aspis utilized a revolutionary 2-point grip system, the porpax, a central bronze band for the forearm, and the antilabe, a leather handle at the edge. This design shifted the weight from the wrist to the entire arm, allowing for a shield so large it covered the man from chin to knee. But it came with a tactical price. Because the shield was held on the left arm and extended far beyond the user's left side, it left the right side of the warrior's body exposed. The only way to survive was to tuck that exposed right side behind the shield of the man to your right. This mechanical necessity created the phalanx, a wall of overlapping bronze where no man was an island. If Xanthos lets his shield drop, he doesn't just die, the man next to him dies too. The bronze bucket. Next, Xanthos inspects his helmet. In 500 BC, the Corinthian style is the standard of the day. It is a single, masterful sheet of bronze hammered into a shape that mimics the human face. It is beautiful, and it is a sensory deprivation chamber. As Xanthos slides it on to check the leather padding, the world changes. The vibrant sounds of the Athenian morning, the distant shouting of vendors, the chirping of cicadas, are suddenly muffled into a low, rhythmic thrumming of his own breath. His peripheral vision vanishes. He can see only what is directly in front of him. There are no ear holes. In the heat of an Attic summer, this helmet becomes an oven, cooking the warrior in his own sweat. It is an instrument of total focus. In the phalanx, you don't need to see the big picture. You only need to see the spear tip coming for your throat. The weight of citizenship. Xanthos lays out his linothorax. While movies love the muscled bronze cuirass, the reality for a Zeugitai was often more practical. The linothorax is a vest made of dozens of layers of linen, glued together with animal resin to create a stiff, lightweight composite armor. It is the Kevlar of the ancient world. It's flexible enough to allow him to move, yet tough enough to turn a spear point or an arrow. Beside it lie the greaves, thin sheets of springy bronze that snap onto his shins without the need for straps, held in place by the tension of the metal itself. Every piece of this gear, the shield, the helmet, the armor, the greaves, the 8-foot ashwood dory spear, and the iron Xanthos shortsword represents the panoply. The cost is staggering. A full set of quality gear in 500 BC would cost roughly 75 to 100 drachmae. To put that in perspective, a skilled laborer might earn 1 drachma a day. Xanthos is wearing a year's worth of wages, or the price of a small herd of cattle. This is why the Greeks didn't have a professional standing army. The state didn't provide the gear. The man did. If you couldn't pay, you didn't play. This effectively meant the army of Athens was an exclusive club of the middle and upper classes. The pride and anxiety associated with this gear are captured by the poet Alcaeus, a contemporary of this era, who wrote, "The great house gleams with bronze. The whole roof is well adorned for the sake of Ares with bright helmets, over which white horsehair plumes nod down." There are bright bronze greaves to ward off the strong missile, a defense against the spear. But Alcaeus wasn't just describing a decorative room, he was describing a locker room. The gear was kept polished not for vanity, but to prevent the bronze disease, corrosion, that could weaken the metal. As Xanthos finishes his maintenance, he applies a layer of lanolin, sheep's wool fat, to the iron head of his spear to prevent rust. The smell is pungent, a mix of animal musk and metallic tang. He wipes his hands on his tunic, leaving a dark, greasy stain. This is the grounded realism of the 5th century warrior. He is a man who lives in a constant state of maintenance. He is not a super soldier in a pristine uniform. He is a tinkerer, a mechanic of death. He knows every dent in his shield, every fray in his linen armor. Each mark tells a story of a skirmish or a fall during a drill. As he hangs the armor back up, he feels a strange mixture of security and dread. The bronze is a wall between him and the grave, but it is also a heavy reminder of his obligation. In the democratic experiment of Athens, the price of having a voice in how the city is run is the requirement to stand in the sun, encased in 25 pounds of hot metal, ready to kill or be killed for the men standing beside you. The gear is ready, but a warrior cannot live on bronze alone. The sun is high now, and the belly of the polis is calling. Xanthos leaves his courtyard and heads toward the center of the world, the Agora. Chapter 3. The Agora, the heartbeat of the polis. Leaving the relative quiet of his home, Xanthos steps into the chaotic veins of Athens. In 500 BC, the city is a construction site of ideas. The grand marble monuments that will one day define the Acropolis are mostly dreams or foundations. The old temple of Athena still stands, scarred by time, overlooking a city of mud brick and dust. As Xanthos walks toward the Agora, the sensory shift is violent. The smell of the farm manure and fresh earth is replaced by the pungent bouquet of a city in motion. Roasting meat, sewage, the tang of salt fish from the Black Sea, and the heavy, sweet scent of incense from a dozen small shrines. This is the Agora. To a Spartan, this place would be a cesspool of noise and indecision. To Xanthos, it is the center of the universe. It is a sprawling, irregular square filled with temporary wooden stalls, where the line between a merchant and a politician is non-existent. The noise of democracy. The sound of the Agora is a relentless, overlapping cacophony. You hear the clink-clink of the money changers tapping coins to test their silver content, the bleating of goats being led to the tholos, and above all, the voices. The Greeks were a people obsessed with talk. In the Agora, information is the only currency more valuable than the silver owl-stamped tetradrachm. Xanthos weaves through the crowd. He is not greeted as soldier, but by his name and his deme, his district. Greetings, Xanthos of Melite. In this new democracy, established only 8 years prior by Cleisthenes, your identity is tied to your neighbors. He stops at a stall to buy a handful of dried figs and a leek for his midday meal, but the transaction takes 10 minutes because the vendor wants to discuss the latest rumors from the coast. The news is grim. The Ionian Greeks in Asia Minor are restless under Persian rule. There is talk that they might send envoys to Athens asking for help. This isn't just foreign news to Xanthos, it is a direct threat to his life. If the assembly votes to support the rebels, Xanthos will have to take that bronze shield off the wall and march. The mechanism of power. Xanthos walks past the Bouleuterion, the council house. Here, 500 citizens chosen by lot are preparing the agenda for the next assembly. This is the macro history of the phalanx in action. In a monarchy, the king decides on war over dinner. In Athens, war is a mathematical equation discussed in the open. Xanthos watches a group of men gathered around the eponymy, the statues of the 10 legendary heroes that represent the 10 tribes of Athens. Nailed to the wooden boards at the base of the statues are the official notices. One board lists the names of men called up for border patrol duty. Another lists upcoming trials. There is a visceral tension here. The men Xanthos sees, the tanners, the potters, the wealthy landowners, are his brothers in arms, but they are also his rivals in the law courts and his equals in the vote. This is the polis as a living organism. It is litigious, loud, and often petty. The same man who will save Xanthos's life with a shield in 2 months might sue him over a property boundary tomorrow. The historian Thucydides, writing a few generations later, but capturing the enduring Athenian spirit, noted that the Athenians were incapable of either living a quiet life themselves or of allowing anyone else to do so. You see it in the way Xanthos engages with his peers. They don't just chat, they debate. They use the Socratic method before Socrates was even born, questioning the strategy of the strategoi, the generals, and mocking the slow-witted Spartans. The Spartan mirage versus the Athenian reality. Here we must address the Spartan mirage. The popular image of the ancient Greek is the stoic, silent warrior of Lacedaemon. But the Athenian hoplite was the opposite. He was an amateur who thought he knew better than his commanders. He was a man who expected to be persuaded, not just ordered. As Xanthos eats his leek, leaning against a wooden stoa, he watches a group of Scythian archers, the city's public police force, slaves owned by the state, trying to keep the paths clear. They are an odd sight. trousers-wearing barbarians in a city of draped wool. Their presence is a reminder that even this free democracy relies on the unfree to function. Xanthos' afternoon in the Agora isn't a vacation. He is checking the pulse. He needs to know if the price of grain is rising, indicating a fear of war, or if the priests have seen bad omens in the morning's sacrifices. He feels the weight of the city. In Sparta, the state thinks for you. In Athens, the state is you. The transition to the physical. By midday, the heat in the Agora becomes oppressive. The dust kicked up by thousands of sandals hangs in the air, coating Xanthos' throat. His mind is full of politics and rumors, but his body must remain ready for the reality of those rumors. He turns away from the shouting matches and the smell of the fish market, heading toward the outskirts of the city. It is time to burn off the nervous energy of the city. He is heading to the Gymnasium, not to lift weights for vanity, but to undergo the brutal, dusty preparation required to survive the push. Chapter 4. The Gymnasium, the Amateur's Sweat. By early afternoon, the Athenian sun is a physical weight. The shadows of the olive trees shorten, and the air in the city center becomes a stagnant soup of dust and humidity. For Xanthos, this is the most grueling part of the day. He leaves the political theater of the Agora and walks toward the Kynosarges, one of the great gymnasia on the outskirts of the city. In our modern world, the gym is a place of vanity or personal health. In 500 BC, the gymnasium, literally the place of nakedness, is a military laboratory. It is here that the amateur farmer is forged into a structural component of the state, the ritual of the oil. Xanthos strips. He does not wear a loincloth or tunic. He stands in the dirt exactly as he came into the world. This total nakedness is uniquely Greek, a rejection of barbarian modesty and a celebration of the civic body. He reaches for a small ceramic flask of olive oil, pouring the viscous golden liquid into his palms and rubbing it over his limbs until his skin glints like the bronze of his shield. This isn't for hydration. The oil, when mixed with the fine dust of the practice pits, creates a protective paste that prevents his skin from cracking in the sun and, more importantly, makes him slippery. In the brutal wrestling matches to come, a grip must be earned, not simply taken. Pale, the physics of the phalanx. Xanthos enters the skama, the wrestling pit. There are no weights to lift here, no machines. His workout is another human being. He squares off against a neighbor, a man who owns a pottery workshop. They engage in pale, upright wrestling. This is the most important training a hoplite can undergo. Why? Because the phalanx is not a fencing match. It is a human car crash. When the two lines of shields collide, the spear often breaks in the first 10 seconds. After that, it becomes a contest of core strength, balance, and the ability to keep your feet while 100 men try to push you backward. Xanthos feels the pottery maker's sweat-slicked shoulder dig into his chest. He breathes in the scent of sun-baked earth and rancid oil. His muscles scream as he drives his legs into the dirt, practicing the othismos, the push. If he trips here, he gets a face full of dust. If he trips in battle, he is trampled to death by his own friends. The amateur versus the machine. This is where we must dismantle the Spartan mirage. The popular image of the warrior is the Spartan Homeos, a man who has done nothing but train since he was 7 years old in the brutal Agora. The Spartans were the only professionals in a world of amateurs. To a Spartan, Xanthos is a part-timer, a soft-bellied farmer. But the Athenian response was philosophical. The Athenians believed that a man who chose to train out of civic duty was more reliable than a man who was beaten into it by a state machine. Pericles would later boast that while the Spartans labored from early youth under a laborious discipline, the Athenians lived at ease yet were equally ready to face the same dangers. Xanthos isn't a super soldier. He is an amateur. His training is the 3 days a week he can spare from his crops. His strength comes from the plow. His discipline comes from the fear of letting down his neighbors. The scraper and the dust. The session ends not with a shower, but with the slengis or strigil. Xanthos takes the curved bronze tool and scrapes the glop off his body, the gray, gritty mixture of sweat, oil, and Athenian soil. This debris, known as gloios, was actually collected in some gymnasia and sold as a medicinal ointment for aches and pains. It is a visceral reminder of the grit of Greek life. There is no clean glory here. The warrior is a man who is perpetually covered in the landscape he is sworn to protect. The great lawgiver Solon, in a dialogue recorded by Lucian, explained why the city forced its citizens into the dust. We provide these exercises, not merely that they may win prizes, but that they may acquire a certain robust habit of body, more capable of enduring hardships, and that the spirit also may be sharpened. As Xanthos puts his tunic back on, his heart rate slowing, he feels that robust habit. His hands are raw, his eyes sting from the salt, and his joints are stiff. But as he looks at the other men in the gymnasium, the bakers, the tanners, the poets, he sees a grid. He sees the phalanx. He isn't a soldier because he wants to be. He is a soldier because he has a stake in the soil, and as the afternoon sun begins to dip, he must return to that soil. The gymnasium has prepared his body. Now the farm will remind him why he fights. Chapter 5. The Rural Reality, the Power of the Yoke. The long shadows of the late afternoon stretch across the Attic landscape as Xanthos leaves the city walls behind. His walk home is not a commute in the modern sense. It is a transition from the world of the polis, the city, to the world of the oikos, the household. While we often think of the Greek warrior as a city dweller, the reality of 500 BC is that the heart of Athens beat in its countryside. Xanthos' identity as a warrior is inseparable from his identity as a farmer. He is a man of the yoke, and as he approaches his small estate, the why of his warfare becomes visible in the silver-green leaves of his olive trees. The agricultural logic of war. In the ancient Mediterranean, war followed the rhythm of the seasons. It was a seasonal activity, squeezed into the gaps of the agricultural calendar. You did not fight in the winter because the roads were mud and the seas were death. You did not fight in the early autumn because the harvest demanded every hand. The campaigning season was a narrow window between the late spring and midsummer, after the grain was sown but before it was time to reap. Xanthos looks over his barley fields. In a few months, the stalks will be golden and heavy. This is his vulnerability. In Greek warfare, you didn't need to siege a city to win. You simply had to threaten a man's crops. If a Spartan or a Theban army marched into this valley, they wouldn't necessarily head for the Acropolis. They would head for these fields. They would begin the land-burning, chopping down olive trees that took 20 years to mature and setting fire to the grain. This is the psychological engine of the Hoplite. Xanthos doesn't stand in the phalanx for glory or empire. He stands there because if the line breaks, his children starve. The phalanx is quite literally a human fence built to protect the domestic breadbasket. The invisible engine, the enslaved. As Xanthos enters his yard, he is met by an elderly man named Syros. Syros is not a citizen. He is a human tool, an enslaved person likely captured in a northern skirmish years ago. This is the uncomfortable, grounded reality of the cradle of democracy. Xanthos can spend his morning debating in the Agora and his afternoon wrestling in the Gymnasium only because Syros is here, his back bent over the soil. The relationship is not the plantation-style slavery of the American South, but it is no less a system of total control. Syros manages the day-to-day drudgery, cleaning the stables, hauling water, and tending the vines. In Sparta, the Helots were a state-owned underclass held down by ritualized terror. In Athens, the enslaved were integrated into the household, yet they remained the silent foundation of the warrior class. Without the labor of the unfree, the free citizen soldier could not exist. The physics of the soil. Xanthos spends the remaining hours of daylight working alongside Syros. He checks the stone walls of his terrace, restacking a section that collapsed during the spring rains. He uses a heavy iron hoe to break the crust of the earth around his vines. This labor is his true basic training. The strength required to lift a 15-pound shield for 3 hours doesn't come from lifting weights. It comes from a lifetime of lifting stones, pushing plows, and wrestling stubborn oxen. When Xanthos stands in the phalanx, he isn't using soldier muscles, he is using farmer muscles. His endurance is the endurance of a man who knows that if he stops working, the weeds will win. This rural reality dictated the limits of Greek power. Because the army was composed of men like Xanthos, it was a flash mob military. There were no standing barracks, no central commissaries, and no professional logistics corps. When the call to arms came, Xanthos would be expected to bring his own food, usually a 3-day supply of salted meat, olives, and onions. This meant that Greek wars were short, sharp, and decisive. You couldn't stay in the field for months. The men had to get back to the harvest. If a battle wasn't won in a day, the army often simply dissolved and went home. It was a system of total war on a part-time schedule. Primary source, the bitter choice. The historian Thucydides captures the agony of the rural citizen when war finally arrives. The Athenians had only recently finished restoring their households after the Persian retreat. It was hard for them to leave their homes and the temples which had always been theirs. They were being asked to change their whole way of life. For Xanthos, the polis is an abstract idea he discusses in the Agora, but the oikos, the farm, is the visceral reality. As he washes the dirt from his hands in a stone trough, he looks at the calluses. They are thick and yellow. These are the same hands that will grip the ashwood shaft of his spear. The evening chill. The sun dips below the horizon, and the air cools instantly. The sounds of the farm begin to quiet, the lowing of the oxen, the cluck of a few scrawny chickens. Xanthos feels a deep, soul-level exhaustion. He has spent the day as a politician, an athlete, and a laborer. He enters his house as the lamps are lit. The smell of burning olive oil, the same oil he spent all year producing, fills the room. Tonight he will eat with his family, but the shield in the corner seems to glow in the lamplight. It is a reminder that his peace is a fragile thing, bought with the promise of violence. The farmer is resting, but the warrior is always on call. Tomorrow, the herald might arrive. Tomorrow, the rural reality might collide with the grand strategy of empires. But for now, there is only the sound of his children's voices and the taste of the first wine of the evening. Chapter 6. The Kikion and the Gods. Night has fallen over the Attic countryside, and the internal rhythm of the oikos slows. Xanthos sits in the dim light of a flickering clay lamp. The physical labor of the day, the wrestling, the plowing, the walking, has left his body demanding fuel. But in 500 BC, eating is not merely a biological necessity. It is a spiritual negotiation. Before a morsel of food passes his lips, Xanthos takes a small terracotta cup of wine. He doesn't drink it. Instead, he tilts his hand, letting a few dark drops splash onto the packed earth floor. For Athena, he mutters. This is a libation, a down payment on his survival. In the Greek mind, there is no supernatural world separate from the natural one. The gods are simply powerful, capricious neighbors. If you don't acknowledge them, they might just forget to hold your shield arms steady when the spears begin to fly. The diet of the phalanx. The meal is humble. There is no roasted ox or Homeric feast tonight. Xanthos eats a thick, gray gruel known as kykion. It is a mixture of water, toasted barley, and grated goat cheese, flavored with pennyroyal or mint. This is the fuel of the Greek warrior. Barley was the meat of the poor and the middle class alike. It is dense, slow-burning fiber that provides the sustained energy needed for a day of heavy labor or a march in full panoply. Beside the bowl sits a small heap of salted olives, bitter and oily, and a piece of dried fish, likely imported from the Hellespont. Everything Xanthos consumes is tied to the geography of the Mediterranean. There is no sugar, no potatoes, no citrus. His palate is defined by the Mediterranean triad: grain, oil, and wine. It is a diet that makes for lean, hard men. When the Persians eventually arrive, they will be shocked by the poverty of the Greek diet, unable to understand how men who eat like peasants can fight like lions. The wine, the great diluter. Xanthos drinks his wine, but never neat. To drink unmixed wine was considered the mark of a barbarian or a madman. He mixes it in a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 parts water to 1 part wine. It is lukewarm and slightly resinous, as the jars are sealed with pine pitch to prevent spoilage. This diluted wine serves a dual purpose. It kills the bacteria in the well water, making it safe to drink, and it provides a mild caloric boost without clouding the mind. A hoplite must be sober-headed. The discipline of the phalanx requires a man who can hear commands over the roar of battle, not a man lost in a drunken fog. Analytical narrative, the religion of anxiety. As he eats, Xanthos looks at a small, crude wooden figurine of Athena in the corner. His relationship with the divine is purely transactional. This is the macro history of Greek religion. It is a religion of orthopraxy, right action, rather than orthodoxy, right belief. Xanthos doesn't need to love the gods. He needs to respect them. Before the army marches, the strategoi generals will sacrifice a goat and have a mantis, seer, inspect the liver. If the liver is discolored or missing a lobe, the expedition is cancelled. It doesn't matter if the strategic opportunity is perfect. If the gods say no, the amateur army stays home. For Xanthos, this provides a strange sense of comfort. It shifts the burden of destiny off his shoulders and onto the gods. If he dies in battle, it wasn't a failure of his training. It was the Moira, his allotted portion of fate. Sensory realism, the sounds of the night. The house is quiet, save for the crackle of the hearth and the distant, rhythmic chirping of crickets. The air smells of the sharp, acidic tang of the vinegar wine and the heavy, earthy scent of the barley. Xanthos feels the weight of his family around him. His children sleep in the upper rooms. His wife works the loom by the light of a separate lamp. This is what the black broth of the Spartans lacked, the domestic warmth that makes a man want to live. The Spartan warrior is a professional killer who lives in a barracks. The Athenian warrior is a protector who lives in a home. Though written later, Xenophon's work captures the timeless sentiment of the Greek householder. For a man of honorable character, there is no better occupation or science than agriculture. For the city, the farm is the mother and the nurse. As Xanthos finishes his kykion, he wipes his bowl clean with a crust of bread. He feels a momentary peace. His belly is full, his gods are paid, and his household is secure. But as he stands to extinguish the lamp, he hears it, the distant, unmistakable sound of a horse galloping toward the center of the village. It is a sound that cuts through the night like a blade. The domestic quiet is about to be shattered. The gods have received his libation, but they are about to demand much more than a few drops of wine. Chapter 7. The call to arms, the muster. The hoofbeats stop in the village square, but the silence that follows is louder than the noise. Then comes the cry of the herald, a jagged sound that rips through the thin walls of the oikos. The ecclesia has voted. The rumors from the Agora have solidified into a terrifying reality. The Persians have landed at the Bay of Marathon, or perhaps a rival city-state has crossed the border at Eleusis. For Xanthos, the why no longer matters. The what is standing in the corner of his room. He doesn't rush. A hoplite's preparation is a cold, methodical ritual. He reaches for his linothorax, the stiffened linen armor, and begins the laborious process of lacing it tight. His wife, Aristomache, assists him in silence. There is no weeping, not yet. In the world of the Greek polis, women are the keepers of the home, and their primary role in war is to ensure the warrior leaves with his shield or on it. The 3-day supply. Xanthos packs his wicker basket, the spirus. There is no quartermaster in the Athenian army. He must carry his own life support, a bag of salt-cured olives, a slab of dried saltfish, and 3 days' worth of barley meal. This 3-day rule is the leash that keeps Greek warfare short. If they cannot win a battle within 3 days of marching, they will starve. Beside him, Syros, the enslaved attendant, prepares his own smaller pack. Syros will carry the heavy bedding and the cooking pots. While the movies show the hoplite as a lone hero, the reality is a long, dusty column of citizens followed by a shadow army of the unfree. For every 10,000 shields, there are thousands of attendants making the march a slow, sprawling migration of the city's male population. The logistics of the march. The muster point is the Leipzidrian, a designated spot on the outskirts of the city. As Xanthos walks toward it, he joins a river of bronze. Neighbors who were debating grain prices yesterday now walk in grim unison. The weight is the first thing that hits him. Between the shield, the armor, the spear, and the pack, Xanthos is carrying nearly 60 pounds of gear. He doesn't wear his helmet yet. It hangs from a strap on his chest. To wear it now would be to invite heat stroke before the enemy is even sighted. He carries his 8-foot dory spear over his shoulder, the iron tip gleaming in the moonlight. The army is not organized by rank or profession. It is organized by the 10 tribes of Athens. Xanthos stands with the men of the tribe of Achamantis. These are the men he grew up with. They are his cousins, his creditors, and his rivals. This is the macro history of Greek military effectiveness. The phalanx works because of social pressure. You cannot run away when the man behind you is your father-in-law, and the man in front of you is your neighbor. To drop the shield, ripsaspis, is not just a military failure, it is a social suicide. You would never be able to sit in the Agora or vote in the assembly again. The shame would follow your children for generations. The Spartan poet Tyrtaeus, whose verses were sung by all Greeks to steel their nerves, wrote, "For it is a shameful thing when an older man falls in the front rank and lies before the younger. But for the young man, all is decorous while he still has the splendid flower of lovely youth. Let him stand with feet set wide, biting his lip with his teeth." As Xanthos reaches the muster point, the strategoi, the 10 elected generals, are consulting the omens. A goat is slaughtered. The silence of thousands of men is absolute as they wait for the seer's verdict. If the gods are angry, they will march back to their beds. If the gods are hungry, they will march toward the enemy. The word comes down. The omens are favorable. The order is given. There are no bugles, only the rhythmic, haunting sound of the aulos, a double-reed flute. The high, piercing notes are designed to keep the thousands of marching feet in a single, synchronized pulse. Xanthos steps off. The sound of 10,000 sandals hitting the dry earth creates a low-frequency hum that vibrates in his chest. The dust rises, coating his tongue and turning his sweat into a gray paste. He looks at the man to his right, a stonemason he hasn't spoken to in years. They nod. The politics of the city are gone. The farm is a memory. There is only the rhythm of the flute, the weight of the bronze, and the long, dark road toward the horizon. Chapter 8. The Othismos, the physics of the push. The march has ended in a valley of scorched grass and jagged limestone. Across a few hundred yards of open ground, the enemy is a shimmering line of bronze and color. Xanthos feels a cold, hollow sensation in his gut, a primal fear that no amount of wrestling in the gymnasium can truly erase. He reaches for his Corinthian helmet and slides it over his head. The world vanishes. The peripheral vision, the smell of the pines, the voices of his friends, all of it is cut off by the bronze walls of the helmet. He is now looking at the world through two narrow almond-shaped slits. His breathing is loud, metallic, and echoing. To his left and right, the men of the tribe of Achamantis are doing the same. They are no longer a collection of farmers and potters. They are a machine of interlocking scales. The collision. The aulos flutes begin a low, haunting melody. The command is given, not with a shout, but with a steady, rhythmic pace. As the phalanx moves forward, the drift begins. Because every man is instinctively trying to tuck his unshielded right side behind the shield of the man to his right, the entire Athenian line begins to skew toward the right flank. Then, the walk becomes a trot. The trot becomes a run. The Greeks raise the paean, a terrifying rhythmic war cry, Eleu, Eleliu. The impact is not like a movie battle. It is not a series of elegant duels. It is a literal human car crash. When Xanthos's aspis hits the shield of the man opposite him, the sound is like a thunderclap in a timber yard, the crack of oak and bronze meeting at 20 miles per hour. The Othismos, the crowd physics of killing. Now begins the Othismos, the push. Xanthos is in the second rank. He cannot see the enemy. He can only see the bronze back of the man in front of him. He leans his shoulder into the interior of his shield and pushes with all the strength of his legs, his feet digging into the dusty attic soil for purchase. This is where the macro history of the phalanx is written. It is a game of crowd physics. Behind Xanthos are 6 more ranks of men, all leaning forward, creating a literal wall of meat and metal. If the front man falls, the pressure of the men behind him keeps him upright just long enough for the next man to step over his body and fill the gap. Xanthos reaches his spear over the shoulder of the man in front of him. He isn't aiming for a heart. He is looking for a gap, a throat, an eye slit, a groin. He stabs downward in a rhythmic sewing machine motion. He feels the spear tip catch on something soft, then a sickening thud as it hits a bone. He doesn't look. He just pushes. Inside the helmet, it is a sensory nightmare. The heat is unbearable, the sweat stinging his eyes with no way to wipe them. The air is thick with the smell of sudden, involuntary human evacuation, the fear scent of hundreds of men. There is no glory here. There is only the frantic, claustrophobic struggle to keep his feet. If he trips, the 8 ranks behind him will trample him into the dirt before they even realize he's gone. The sound is a wall of white noise, the screaming of the wounded, the clatter-clack of spear shafts breaking, and the rhythmic thump of shields being used as battering rams. The physics of the aspis. This is why the aspis was designed the way it was. Its convex shape is perfect for this moment. It isn't just a shield, it's a wedge. As Xanthos pushes, the curve of the bronze allows the enemy's spear tips to glance off, sliding away into the gap between men. But the enemy is pushing back. Xanthos feels the line buckle. For a moment, he is lifted off his feet by the sheer pressure of the men behind him. He is terrified, but he is also part of something larger. This is the ultimate expression of the polis, 1,000 men acting as a single, crushing weight. The historian Xenophon described this exact moment. When they were within reach of one another, they came to close quarters. Shield pressed against shield. They pushed, they fought, they killed, they died. Note the order. Pushed comes first. Suddenly, the pressure gives way. The man in front of Xanthos stumbles forward as the enemy line snaps. The human fence has broken. In a phalanx battle, once the line breaks, the battle is effectively over. The losers don't stay to fight individual duels. They turn and run. Xanthos stumbles out into the sudden, blinding light of the open field. He rips his helmet off, gasping for air that doesn't smell like blood and copper. His spear is broken, his shield is dented, and his hands are shaking with an adrenaline dump so violent he can barely stand. He is alive. But as he looks down at the tangled heap of bronze and limbs at his feet, he realizes the day is far from over. Chapter 9. The Aftermath, the Trophy, and the Trauma. The screaming has faded into a low, rhythmic moaning that seems to rise from the very earth. Xanthos stands in the center of the slaughter, his chest heaving, his vision blurred by a film of salt and grit. The glory of the poets is nowhere to be found. Instead, there is the smell, a heavy, cloying mixture of iron, ruptured bowels, and the scorched hair scent of bronze that has been hammered by repeated blows. This is the moment after the Othismos, where the adrenaline retreats and the reality of the amateur warrior's day in the life becomes a weight heavier than any shield. The ritual of the Tropaion. In the world of 500 BC, you do not pursue a defeated enemy to the ends of the earth. There is no cavalry to run them down, and Xanthos is far too exhausted to chase men through the scrubland. Instead, the victors begin a ritual that is as much about psychological closure as it is about celebration. They begin to build the Tropaion, or trophy. Xanthos helps his tribesmen find a sturdy oak tree on the spot where the enemy line first snapped. They strip the armor from a fallen enemy, a bronze breastplate, a dented helmet, a shattered shield, and they nail it to the tree in the shape of a man. This is the origin of our word trophy. It is a dedicated offering to Zeus, marking the turning point, trope of the battle. As he lifts a captured helmet, Xanthos notices a tuft of horsehair stuck in the bronze. He doesn't feel triumph. He feels a strange, numb recognition. The man who wore this was likely a farmer just like him, someone who also worried about the rain and the debt. But in the logic of the polis, that man's life had to be extinguished so that Xanthos's farm could survive. The beautiful death versus the gritty reality. Xanthos begins the grim task of identifying his neighbors. This is the macro history of the citizen soldier. Every casualty is a hole in the community. He finds the potter he wrestled with in the Gymnasium. The man is dead, a spear having found the gap between his greave and his thigh, severing the femoral artery. He died in a pool of dark wine-colored blood. The Greeks called this the kalos thanatos, the beautiful death. They told themselves that to die in the front rank was the highest honor a man could achieve. But as Xanthos helps wrap the body in a cloak, he sees only the waist. This man's kiln will go cold. His children will now be the responsibility of the tribe. The limits of medicine. For the wounded, the day in the life becomes a descent into a different kind of hell. There are no combat medics. A man with a punctured lung or a gut wound is effectively a dead man walking. The only treatment is a sponge soaked in vinegar or wine to wash the wound, and perhaps a poultice of herbs. Xanthos watches as a friend tries to pull a bronze arrowhead from his shoulder. The barbs catch on the muscle fibers, and the man's screams are a jagged contrast to the stoic silence of the Spartan ideal. In 500 BC, more men die in the 3 days after the battle from sepsis than die on the field itself. The bronze that protected them also poisons them. The dirt of the field is now inside their bodies. The battle ended 30 minutes ago, but the trauma is just beginning. Modern historians often wonder if the Greeks suffered from PTSD. While they didn't have the term, they had the ritual. Xanthos and his fellow survivors must undergo a ritual purification. They cannot simply walk back into the city with the blood guilt, miasma of killing upon them. They wash in a nearby stream, the water turning a murky brown as it carries away the Athenian soil and the blood of their enemies. This isn't just physical cleaning, it's an attempt to wash away the beast they had to become to survive the push. They sing the paean again, but this time it is a song of healing and thanks to Apollo. The poet Simonides, writing of the fallen, said, "Of those who died at Thermopylae, glorious is the fortune, fair is the doom. Their grave is an altar. Instead of lamentation they have remembrance, and their pity is praise." Xanthos hears these sentiments echoed by the strategoi as they prepare the bodies for the journey back to Athens. But as he looks at his own shield, now gouged and scarred, he realizes that the remembrance is a cold comfort. He is alive, but he is fundamentally altered. The man who woke up this morning to check his olives is gone. The man standing on this field is a veteran. As evening falls over the battlefield, the winners grant a truce for the dead to the losers. The enemy returns, unarmed and heads bowed, to collect their fallen. There is a heavy, respectful silence between the two groups. Yesterday they were enemies. Tonight they are both just mourners. Xanthos begins the long walk back toward the city. The gear feels twice as heavy now. The bronze greaves chafe against his raw skin, and the strap of the aspis has bruised his collarbone black and blue. The smell of the battlefield stays in his nostrils, a cloying sweet rot that he suspects he will never quite be able to wash away. The sun sets behind the mountains of the Peloponnese, casting long, bloody streaks across the sky. Xanthos is heading home, but he is carrying the ghosts of the valley with him. The day in the life is moving toward its final hour, and the horizon is no longer clear. Chapter 10. The Shadow of the East. The stars are sharp and cold above the Attic Peninsula as Xanthos finally approaches the gates of his village. The rhythmic clink-clink of his broken spear butt hitting the stones is the only sound in the darkness. He is a silhouette of bronze, coated in the dust of a conflict that lasted less than an hour but will haunt his sleep for a lifetime. He reaches his door and pauses. He doesn't go inside immediately. Instead, he sets his shield, now bearing a deep, jagged gouge from an enemy blade, against the mud brick wall. He sits on the threshold, the silence of the countryside rushing back into his ears to fill the void left by the screaming of the phalanx. The internalized war. This is the hidden macro-history of the Greek warrior. We often view these men as stone statues, cold and unfeeling. But Xanthos is a man of the 5th century, a century defined by the tension between individual humanity and the demands of the state. As he stares at his hands, still stained with the gray gloyos of the Gymnasium and the dark iron scent of the battlefield, he is processing the paradox of the citizen. In a few days, he will return to the assembly. He will raise that same hand to vote on new taxes or the construction of a new trireme. The hand that held the spear will now hold the ballot. This is the weight of democracy. It is not just the freedom to choose, it is the responsibility to live with the consequences of that choice. Every man he saw fall in the dust today was there because of a collective decision made in the Agora, the looming empire. As Xanthos sits, a neighbor, another survivor from the tribe of Achamantis, stops by. He brings news that didn't reach the front lines. The messenger from the coast has arrived. The Ionian revolt in Asia Minor is not just a local squabble. It has ignited the fury of the great king, Darius of Persia. For the last century, the Greeks have lived in a bubble, fighting their ritualized, small-scale hoplite wars over border strips and cattle. But the world is changing. To the east, a superpower is awakening, an empire that spans 3 continents, capable of fielding armies that would make the Athenian phalanx look like a village guard. The Spartan mirage of isolation is about to shatter. The Athenian experiment of democracy is about to be tested by fire. Xanthos realizes that today's battle was merely a rehearsal. The heavy bronze armor he spent his life's savings on is no longer just a symbol of his status. It is the only thing standing between the Greek world and total absorption into a foreign satrapy. We must look at the physics of what is coming. The Persian machine is different. They don't fight with the othismos. They fight with clouds of arrows, with elite cavalry, and with a multi-ethnic professional force. Xanthos's amateur shield wall is about to collide with a professional imperial bureaucracy. The Greek response to this threat would define Western history. They would realize that their only hope lay in the very thing that made them so litigious and difficult, their polis identity. Because Xanthos owns his land, because he votes for his laws, and because he buys his own armor, he has a psychological buy-in that an imperial conscript lacks. He isn't fighting for a great king who lives in a palace 1,000 miles away. He is fighting for the olive tree 10 yards behind him. The playwright Aeschylus, who would himself fight at Marathon and Salamis, later wrote in his play The Persians, Theia te onomata, the gods have names. He captured the Greek belief that they weren't just fighting men, but a different way of existing in the world. For Xanthos, the day in the life ends with the realization that his life is no longer just his own. It belongs to the Hellenes. The final sensory return, the door opens behind him. Aristomache stands there with a small oil lamp. She doesn't ask if he won. The fact that he is standing there is answer enough. She sees the blood on his greaves and the hollow look in his eyes. The water is warm, she says. Xanthos stands, his joints popping with a sound like dry kindling. He picks up his shield. He will spend the next week cleaning it, hammering out the dents, and rubbing it with oil until the bronze reflects the sun once more. He will go back to his fields. He will prune the vines and scold the oxen. But he will keep his spear sharp. As he steps into the house, the smell of the barley soup, the same kaikion he eats every night, greets him. It is the smell of home, of safety, and of the status quo. But as he looks back one last time at the dark horizon toward the east, he knows the day is over, but the war has only just begun. The legacy of the bronze. Xanthos was not a hero of legend. He was a middle-class man who lived a life of grit and anxiety. He was part of a society that was often cruel, deeply reliant on slavery, and perpetually at war with itself. Yet, in the day in the life of this Athenian hoplite, we see the blueprint of the modern world. We see the birth of the citizen soldier. We see the idea that a man's worth is tied to his contribution to the collective. And we see the heavy, expensive, and terrifying price of freedom. When you look at the gleaming statues of the Parthenon in the years to come, remember the smell of the lanolin and the sound of the sand on the shield. Remember Xanthos. Because the golden age of Greece wasn't built on marble. It was built on the weary shoulders of men who, after a long day of work and a brutal hour of slaughter, still had to find the strength to walk home and do it all again tomorrow. When we look back at the 5th century BC, we often see only the finished masterpieces, the flawless logic of Plato, the towering marble of the Parthenon, and the sweeping tragedies of Sophocles. But those heights were only reachable because men like Xanthos were willing to stand in the dust. They were willing to be the man of the yoke, bearing the literal weight of their city's defense on their bruised shoulders. The story of the Greek warrior is not a story of gods or super soldiers. It is the story of the citizen, the farmer who votes, the poet who fights, and the neighbor who holds the line. It is a story of human vulnerability encased in 25 pounds of hot, stifling bronze. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the gritty reality of the Athenian front line. If you found this deep dive into the life of Xanthos insightful, don't stop here. The Greek world was a tapestry of radical differences, and while Athens was experimenting with democracy, its great rival was perfecting a very different and much darker machine of war. To see how the other half lived, and how the Spartan mirage compares to the reality we've explored today, be sure to check out our video, A Day in the Life of a Spartan Warrior. You can find it right now in our Ancient Greece playlist. There, we follow Aristodemus into the bone-deep chill of the Eurotas Valley to discover what it truly costs to be an equal. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments. Would you rather have stood in the Athenian phalanx or endured the Spartan Agora? Until next time, keep looking for the history behind the marble.